Let's continue in these fundamentals for the Sunni intellectual. We're just on the verge of the end of the book now. This is the next to the last chapter. And this chapter is about speech. Speech means talking, communicating. The author says there still remains matters pertaining to speech. Yani, because we're talking about what helps you think better, uh, what makes you more accurate. And one of those, which is very important, is listening to others and knowing how to debate and asking and answering questions. This means talking to people and listening to people. When it comes to listening to others, for example, so if someone wants to ask you a question, then it's a good idea, if you want to entertain his question, it's a good idea for you to let him finish saying what he wants to say. I remind myself, sometimes I rush to answer the person before he finishes his question, but usually I don't. Even sometimes I feel the urge to do it, but I don't, and I let the person finish saying what he wants to say. And this is a very important thing. And knowing how to debate, that involves listening to someone, responding to him, and responding in a good way here. This is a very delicate subject, debating here. And asking questions and answering questions. Why do you even ask a question? Sometimes you ask a question because you want to know the answer. Sometimes you ask a question because you want to test the one you're asking. It's testing the one you're asking is more important than the answer that you want. That's really is your goal behind the question. And answering questions, giving clear answers. Yani, you give clear question and then receive, inshallah, a clear answer. Yani, if you're the one answering, give a clear answer. Some people, their questions to me are usually unclear. Some people, it's their habit to ask me unclear questions. So if you're a person who deals with me, and then a lot of times I say to you, your question is not clear, then yani, think about that. Maybe it's me, but maybe it's not me. Be always correct and accurate. Oh, well spoken Muslim. Be always correct and accurate. Did you ever hear someone say, you always want to be correct, don't you? And in their minds, this is a dispraise. If someone says that to me, I'll think they're silly. What are you supposed to be wrong? Yeah, I always want to be correct. Of course. Always be correct. Try to be correct 100% of the time. And accurate. That means factual. Oh, well spoken Muslim. When you speak, speak clearly and enunciate. And if you make a mistake when you speak, repeat yourself, especially if you're trying to learn Arabic. If you make a mistake, repeat yourself. And probably any language that you're trying to learn. If you make a mistake, repeat yourself so that you don't develop a habit which is a mistake. And you don't have to speak fast. The Prophet ﷺ didn't speak fast, swiftly. That's what Aisha said. When she saw some people reviewing the hadiths at high speed, she said the Messenger of Allah ﷺ did not used to deliver the hadiths with this speed as you do. And think before you speak, and I remind myself, and I ask Allah to enable me to adhere to my own advice. Think before you speak, and then say something correct and accurate and wise. I mean, when I say think before you speak, that means even if it means you need to speak a little bit slowly so that you can give yourself time to think. That's better than just speaking fast and being unclear and making mistakes. And if you listen well to others, then you might find that this person who's speaking slowly and seems weird to you, actually, this person might be a very clever one. And that person even might realize that someone that people underestimate him. You're going to be underestimating that one who speaks slowly and seems weird. Allah says in the 70th verse of Surah Al-Ahzab, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا. All those who have believed, fear Allah and say an accurate statement. Yani, let everything you say be accurate. And don't mind saying, I don't know. And if you need to get used to saying it, then get used to saying it so that it's easy for you to say, I don't know. Saying something good is better than being silent. And being silent is better than saying something without goodness. And what are some of the examples of statements without goodness? Profanity and jokes. A lot of times, jokes, especially if the joke has a lie. Joke is not necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of times there's no goodness in it. You might say something to put delight into the heart of the Muslims, for example. It's no problem. The Prophet did, alayhi salatu wasalam, sometimes he, if you accept the word, he did kid around sometimes. Yani, he would be, also, if you accept this word, lighthearted in some of the things that he said sometimes. He said in the hadith, Inni la amzah. I do indeed amzah. Amzah means I joke or I kid. Sometimes he said, indeed I do. Inni la amzah. There's an emphasis in there. He said, I do indeed sometimes commit some mazah, some joking or playing or some lighthearted statements. وَإِنِّي لَا أَقُولُ إِلَّا حَقًّا. And indeed, I don't say anything but the truth. That's his hadith, alayhi salatu wassalam. إِنِّي لَأَمْزَحْ وَإِنِّي لَا أَقُولُ إِلَّا حَقًّا أو كما قال. I do indeed joke or kid around sometimes. That's not frequent from the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, though. And I don't say anything but the truth. So he doesn't joke with a lie. But being a comedian, that's not a good idea. It doesn't have virtue. Being a comedian, it doesn't have virtue. Not Islamically. For the kuffar, it does, though. That's why there's comedians, they celebrate them. Although you see those comedians are crass, rude, they say many lies, and offensive. So saying something good is better than being silent. And being silent is better than saying something without goodness. And saying something because it is the truth is not always good. That's very important. You might say to somebody, why did you say that? He would say, because it's true. So if that's the only reason you said it, because it's true, that doesn't mean that you're wise. Don't say something because it's true. Say something because there's a benefit in it. Or be silent. I think the first wise statement that ever crossed my ears, I heard as a youngster, as a child in grade school, and I heard it from from a classmate of mine. One girl, she said in the class, my mother said The emptiest cans make the most noise. The emptiest cans make the most noise. And I never heard that from anyone else all my life. Do you know what that means? It means if you had an empty can and you dropped it, it's going to make a loud sound because it's empty. But if you had a can that was full and you dropped it, it's not going to make a loud sound because it's full. So it's going to muffle the sound. The fullness of the can is going to muffle the sound when it falls, when it hits the ground. What this means is if you want to see, if you want to determine who are the emptiest people, who are the most foolish people, then look at those who talk a lot. The emptiest cans make the most noise. And it's known, Yani, that usually, or let me say, a sign that someone's intelligent, not a proof, but a sign, is that he's silent. A lot, that is. That he's doesn't talk a lot. Some people say, I don't have a filter. If someone says, I don't have a filter, that's that person basically saying, I am a fool. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, كفى بالمرء كذبا أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. It's enough. Uh, it's enough for a person as a lie for him to say all that he heard. It's enough of a lie for a person to say everything that he heard. What this means is don't say everything that you heard. You shouldn't even just say something because it's true. Rather, reserve your speech. If you want, think about your speech like limited ammo, limited ammunition, not unlimited. If you had unlimited ammunition, you're going to just hold the trigger and let your bullets fly without stopping ever. But if you have limited ammunition, then you're just going to shoot when you need to. It was said about some of the wise ones that they would put a date pit in their mouth or something. This thing that's in their mouth, it stops them from talking because it's in their mouth. In order to talk, they have to take it out of their mouth. A lie, a lie, a lie. كفى بالمرء كذبا أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. Did I say sin? A lie. This doesn't mean that what he's saying is necessarily a lie, but it means that it's not good just to talk indiscriminately. You know the dangers of the tongue. There are people who are in their graves because of their tongues. May Allah protect us. Well, so what is a lie? A lie is something said contrary to reality. That means while the liar knows reality, he knows what's reality, and he says contrary to it. So that's a lie. Heck of it. Now, if he says something contrary to reality, but he doesn't know that what he's saying is contrary to reality, you could still call it a lie, but it's not a sin because he didn't know. So that's what a lie is. And a pun or wordplay, tawriya, is not a lie. That means, in particular here, what this means, what's intended here, the meaning of tawriya is to say a statement that has two meanings, a close meaning and a far meaning. Close meaning means what comes to mind first. And the speaker means the far meaning. That's the meaning that is unlikely to cross one's mind or is expected to not cross the mind of the hearer. But it is a meaning for his sentence or whatever he said. And the close meaning, the meaning that comes to mind immediately, is not intended by the speaker. This is not a lie. And there's something that people call a lie also that's not a lie, which is leaving out a detail. They call it A lie by omission. It's not if what the person said complies with reality, then it's not a lie, even if you left out details. So be mindful what you call a lie. It's important for you to learn your religion so that you can say things that comply with the religion. If someone was telling you something and so that he doesn't get in trouble, he leaves out a detail, so he omits some information, but he didn't lie. Let's say, for example, a woman's husband didn't tell her all the details of something, but he didn't actually lie. So let her not say, "You're a liar," because he didn't lie. Now, I'm not saying that it's good and fine, but it's not a lie. Just side note also, sometimes, a lot of times, a man would not lie to his wife, but he doesn't want to offer her some information. There's information he doesn't want to offer her, and he doesn't lie to her either. If you find that your husband's like that, then don't push him. Also, sarcasm is intended for mockery, not lying. Sarcasm is intended for mockery, not lying. Like when Allah Ta'ala says, ذُقْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْكَرِيمُ. This means taste the torture, you kafir. You are indeed the Aziz and the Kareem. Aziz and Kareem, these are noble attributes. Aziz could mean mighty or could mean different things. Kareem could mean noble or generous. But this is sarcasm here. This is to mock the kafir. ذُقْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْكَرِيمُ. So you're not going to say that Allah is a liar here in this ayah, because the kafir is not Aziz and he's not Kareem. Rather, this is a type of speech. It's not a lie. Lying is impossible to attribute to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Now, statements, as you know, they could be explicit or non-explicit. Explicit means has only one meaning. Not explicit means could have more than one meaning, or it's open for interpretation when it's not explicit. And the religious judgment of explicit statements is that an intention, is that an intention is not required for them. An intention is not required for explicit statements. That's an important rule. The religious judgment of explicit statements is that an intention is not required for them. Why don't we make that bold? That's an important rule. When we say that's a religious judgment, that means this is broad. So that's why we have some different categories, like in sales and marriage and divorce and blasphemy. What's an example of an explicit sale? Like to say, I sell this to you for such and such. Or I buy this from you for such and such. That's explicit. But what if someone said, give me this for such and such? Give me. That's not explicit sale. It is a sale though. Give me this for such and such. That's a sale, but it's not explicit statement. Marriage. You say, for example, I give my daughter in marriage to you. That's explicit statement. Or you say, I marry my daughter to you. Or give your daughter in marriage to me. Or marry your daughter to me. That's explicit. But if someone were to say, I give my daughter to you, only without the word marriage in there, then that's not an explicit marriage. And according to Ash-Shafi'i, that's not even valid. The sale is valid if it's not explicit. If you said, give me this for such and such. That's not an explicit statement of a sale, but it is valid. But for marriage, it's not valid to say, I give my daughter to you, without the word marriage in there. Divorce, if it's explicit, is like saying, I divorce you, or you are divorced. Not explicit is like saying, go back to your family, but having the intention of divorcing her. Or cover yourself in front of me. Or I am not lawful for you. So what if a man said to a woman that he was married to, I am not lawful for you. Cover yourself in front of me. Oh, that's not an explicit divorce. Because maybe he means, for example, I have committed apostasy and I'm not a Muslim anymore. So I'm not lawful for you. So cover yourself in front of me. So that's not a divorce. Or maybe he means the marriage we did was never valid in the first place. So I'm not lawful for you. So you need to be able to identify non-explicit statements. And blasphemy, like if someone said, I am a kafir, then that's explicit blasphemy. Or if he said, I believe in blasphemy, that's explicit blasphemy. Or if he said something else, though, like if he said, my affair is in God's hands, that's not explicit blasphemy. Because even though it seems or might seem that he's attributing an organ to God, which is blasphemy, this statement doesn't necessarily mean that he's attributing an organ to God. Or if he says, I worship God most high, that's not explicit blasphemy. So if a statement is explicit, that's what we're talking about now. If it is explicit, then an intention is not required. You don't have to know what he meant. Likewise goes a normal discussion. Do not allow someone to be explicit and then tell you that you are taking his words too literally. Or he says something explicit and then you say to him, what? That means this and this. He said, come on, man, why are you taking my words so literally? So that's how, if you let somebody do that, that's how somebody's going to play games with you. So when you learn these matters that we learned here, this is religion here that I'm telling you. It's not my opinion or some ideas I have. This is what we learned in religion. So when you learn religion and then you stand up for yourself and you stand your ground, you're going to say to him, this is what you said. This statement is an explicit statement. What do you mean I'm taking your words too literally? It's an explicit statement. This is what your statement means. So then what if he says, I didn't mean that? This means he's saying, my intention is something else. Then you need to deal with whatever you're dealing with. You'll need to handle it in the best way so that you get the best result. Like to say to him, you say you didn't mean it, but it is what you said, and what you said doesn't mean anything else. You say you don't mean it, but what you said doesn't mean anything else. Or somebody will say something explicit to you, and then when you call him out on it, he'll say, I didn't mean it like that. Sure you didn't mean it like that? That's the only thing it means. But you might go soft on the person. You want to do what gets you the best results. You don't want to just put them on the spot. You don't want to just be mean for the sake of being mean. You want to get the best result, which is, for example, if something haram is happening, you want to make the haram stop. So it's not a matter of just embarrassing the person or calling him out on his games or whatever. You said one should say it is better not to say hand to that individual. Well, it goes back to your circumstance. The wise ones said, لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَالٍ لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَالٍ. That means every situation has its own statement. So according to that, I don't see that it's appropriate for me to say to you, yes, you should say to him, don't say that. I see it appropriate to answer you by saying, look at your situation. And if you see that this is better, then say it. If you see that it's not better, then don't say it. And if you don't know if it's better or not, then if it were me, I wouldn't say it because I don't know that it's better. But all of this without being a coward, rather just trying to do what's wise. However, not everyone who speaks a language is an expert at it. Even if that's your own language, your native language, doesn't mean you're an expert in that language. It doesn't mean you're a linguist. And one may not know an explicit statement from a non-explicit statement in his own language. So that's true. That's an important statement there, so that you don't run with some idea that might cross your mind from what's being said here. You say, Yani, that last sentence right there is so that you don't hear all of this talk right now and say, okay, that's it. Thank you. Now I'm going to draw a line in the sand and that's it. So you might be a person who doesn't know an explicit statement from a non-explicit statement. So don't rush. Or even if you are an expert in your language, you still might not sometimes know an explicit statement from a non-explicit statement. So don't rush. A speaker's intention is not sought when the statement is explicit. That's repetition. His intention is not sought. It doesn't matter what his intention is when the statement is explicit. What matters when the statement is explicit is if he knows what it means, not what he intends, rather what he understands. Had intention mattered for explicit statements, then one could insult your mother and claim that he praised her. You could say your mom is a dog. And you say, what? You say, no, I mean, she's so loyal, bro. She's great. Or even God and his messenger. If an intention mattered for explicit statements, one could insult God and his messenger and claim that he meant something else. He could say, damn God's messenger, and then claim to be damning the lightning that God brings down from the sky, or claim to be damning a scorpion, for example, and not the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if someone said in your face, damn God's messenger, you're going to say, that's blasphemy. He said, no, I'm talking about the scorpion. Doesn't Allah send the scorpion? So you say to him, God's messenger doesn't mean scorpion. This is blasphemy, you said. So if he says, you're taking my statement too literally, so you're going to say to him, this is what your statement means. That's blasphemy. You need to say your shahada. And I'm drawing a line in the sand here. I'm not going to return your salam. I'm not going to give you a prayer carpet. I'm not going to give you a date at Maghrib time. Say your shahada. Therefore, intention is relevant for statements having more than one linguistic meaning. If he says, my affair is in God's hands. If you wanted to investigate, then you're going to say, what did you mean? What did you intend? So he says, it's in God's control, God's power. So then that's what he meant. And that works in the language, Yani. That's what it could mean in the language. So intention is relevant for statements having more than one linguistic meaning, not explicit statements. And it is not valid to invalidate the use of general statements, as some people do, especially when cornered in a debate. Yani, somebody will be dead wrong, and then you say something, and they're going to say to you, no, don't be general. You're being general here. Now, be specific. Be specific. You don't have to necessarily be specific. What I mean is general statements are valid. It's not right to invalidate a general statement. If anything, just let the person say, but what do you mean specifically here? That's a general statement. Is there any exclusion from this generality of yours? Do you make any exception to this general statement of yours? But you cannot invalidate general statements because they exist in the Quran and in the Hadith. However, some generalities are forbidden, like saying men are dogs. Can't say that general statement because that would include the prophets. And then that's blasphemy. And then what's a person going to say when that person say men are dogs? You tell them that's blasphemy. And you say, why is blasphemy? You tell them because that includes prophets. So what's he going to say? He's going to say, I didn't mean that. That's what you said, though. Do you know the meanings of what you're saying out your mouth? Or you don't know what it means? It would have been another thing had that person said, men are dogs except for the acceptable slaves of Allah, like prophets and saints. Then you're not going to say he committed blasphemy because he made an exception to his generality. But here he generalized and he left it open. That's blasphemy. Generalities can have exceptions. Like when Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. By the asr, Allah swears by the asr. Asr could mean time. Then it would mean Allah swears by time. Or asr could mean the asr prayer. Then it means Allah swears by the asr prayer that indeed man is in a state of loss. Mankind or the human is in a state of loss. Yani the human is a loser. That's a general statement there. Innal insana lafi khusr. Indeed, man is a loser. The human is a loser. But Allah made an exception. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Except those who believed and did righteous deeds. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And except those who advise each other with the truth and they advise each other with patience. So that's a generality at first, but that generality was limited by the exception. And remember, too, and this is important, exceptions don't disprove a rule. An exception does not disprove a rule. An exception proves a rule. Somebody's going to try to flip something on you one day. You're going to tell them something true, and then he's going to say, well, that's not true because I know people who do such and such. You say that's an exception. And what I said is not untrue because you found an exception. Exceptions don't disprove the rule. Exceptions actually prove the rule. And exceptions religiously are even valid in confessions and divorces. So it means, for example, if a person's confessed and said, I owe Fulan $1,000 except for 10. That's valid confession. Or if someone said, I divorced my wife 3 times except 2. That's a valid divorce. O aware Muslim, when 2 authentic statements are both general, authentic statements. So it's not fabrication, 2 authentic statements. When 2 authentic statements are both general, or both are specific, or one is general and the other is specific, or each is general from one perspective and specific from another, and it's possible to reconcile them, then one reconciles them. Something's missing here. So let me add here. There. When 2 authentic statements seem to conflict, it appears to you there's a contradiction between these 2 statements, but both of them are authentic statements. It doesn't say authentic hadith here. We talk about just authentic statements because the point here, the meaning here is that, for example, you're trying to get to the bottom of something or you're trying to understand something. So someone said a statement to you. Say, okay, this statement, I understand what it means. And this statement is authentic. Yani, it was really said and it's relevant. And you say, but there's also this statement. It was also really said and it's relevant. These two statements, though, it seems like they're contradicting each other. Then, if I want to simplify this, then we can read it this way, in a more simple way. O aware Muslim, when two authentic statements seem to conflict, and it is possible to reconcile them, then one reconciles them. And all these words right here, maybe that's potentially confusing for some people. O aware Muslim, when two authentic statements seem to conflict, and both are general, or both are specific, or one is general and the other is specific, or each is general from one perspective and specific from another. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that out right there. Let's make that a footnote. Like both are general, or both are specific, or one is general and the other is specific, or each is general from one perspective and specific from another perspective. There, so now doesn't bog down the body of the book here. Keeps it easy. O aware Muslim, when two authentic statements seem to conflict, and it is possible to reconcile them, then one reconciles them, which means he makes them comply with each other by interpreting each in a specific way. An example is the hadith of Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ said, ألا أخبركم بخير الشهود الذي يأتي بشهادته قبل أن يسألها. Should I not inform you about the best of witnesses? He is the one who comes with his testimony before he is asked for it. So this witness is praiseworthy. He was not summoned, he was not subpoenaed, and he came and offered his testimony anyway. Here, he's praiseworthy. However, it came in the hadith of the two books of Sahih, خيركم قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم ثم يكون بعدهم قوم يشهدون قبل أن يستشهدوا. The best of you is my century, then those who come after them, then those who come after them. Then after them there will be a people who testify before being subpoenaed, yani before being summoned to testify. By the context of this hadith in its entirety, those witnesses are dispraised. Then there will come after them people who testify before being subpoenaed. This is dispraise here. So a hadith denier is going to tell you, your hadiths, your hadiths are full of contradictions. Here's one. In one hadith, your prophet says that the best of witnesses is the one who comes with his testimony before he's asked for it. And then in another hadith, your prophet says, or the prophet said, and he's not going to deny the prophet, although he doesn't really believe in the prophet. He's going to say the prophet said that there would come a people who testify before being subpoenaed. And in this hadith, they are dispraised. So which one is it? Is it praiseworthy to give your testimony before being asked for it? Or is it blameworthy? Is it praiseworthy or is it blameworthy? He's going to tell you that's why we just take the Quran. We don't take the hadiths. Hadiths are full of contradictions. There's no contradiction here. The first refers to who has a witness but does not know, so that he could summon him. And the second refers to the one who knows and does not summon him. So there's no contradiction here. That's how you put statements together when both of them are authentic but it seems like there's a contradiction between them. Yani, we're saying here that came from reliable source, not unreliable source. Now, I just gave you example from the hadiths. For the hadiths of the Prophet, the scholars must do this. For the talk of people, it's not the same obligation. It's not the same obligation when it comes to the talk of the normal people that you have to go through the effort. But what we're saying here is if you really want to understand things and you want to put together the facts properly, then you need to do this type of thing. Or what you could do is say to the person, if it's one person, you could say to him, well, you said this and you said this. Make it make sense for me. Put those together for me because I'm not going to think about it. Sounds like you're contradicting yourself. What are you saying here? This is how to explain what came from Ash-Shafi'i concerning dispraising kalam, the theological rhetoric. Because Ash-Shafi'i, according to some statements that were reported about him, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the worst thing that a person could get involved in is kalam. So kalam, but the Ahlul Sunnah get involved in kalam. But in other statements, he said the worst thing that a person could get involved in is arguing for heretical beliefs. So you put those together. When you put those together, then you know that when he dispraised kalam, he was talking about heretical beliefs. He wasn't talking about all of the kalam, even the kalam of Ahlul Sunnah. But the problem is going to be when you're talking to some ignorant person who doesn't have comprehension. His mind, yani, what we're talking about right now, his mind never even tasted anything like it. So how are you going to explain to him? You might not be able to. You might not be able to make him understand. It's going to be like talking to a brick wall. He thinks you're trying to make excuses for something because he doesn't know how to put things together. Like, what do you say when the hadith denier says to you, your hadiths are full of contradictions? Here, some hadith says that the Prophet ﷺ would urinate sitting down. And here's a hadith that says he urinated standing up. Which one was it? Sitting down or standing up? You say to him, both of them. There's no contradiction here. Sometimes he did this and sometimes he did that. What's wrong with you? Are you stupid or something? But if you didn't learn like this also, then that hadith denier might shake you. When he says to you, hey, here's a hadith, he urinated standing up. Here's a hadith, he urinated sitting down. Which one? So if you don't have enough, you might say, oh my God, what? I gotta go call my sheikh. I'm shaken now. He said, essentially, is it correct to say one should identify the difference, the key detail differentiating why one case is blameworthy and one is praiseworthy, to explain why one statement can have different meanings in different contexts? Yes. Yani, what we're saying is, not everything that seems like it's contradictory is truly contradictory. Yeah, like one statement might have been said in one context, and the other statement is said in a different context. But the statement only at face value, the two statements look like they're contradicting each other, and really they're said in two different contexts altogether. So the way to put them together is going to be to bring out the context of each one so that you show that they're not contradicting each other. That's just one example. You're going to find different scenarios of this. If each statement is general from one perspective and specific from another perspective, the generality of each is specified by the specificity of the other, if possible. Like the hadith of Abu Dawood and others, that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْنِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَنْجُسُ. If water reached the volume of 2 kullats, then surely it does not become filthy. While the hadith of Ibn Majah and others says, Al-ma'u la yunajjisuhu shay' illa ma ghalaba ala rihihi wa ta'mihi wa lawnih. Nothing makes water filthy but what overcomes its smell, taste, or color. So before we read, let's see how someone who's not uh, well versed in some things would think there's contradiction here. He's going to say, okay, the first one, if water reached 2 kullats, then it surely does not become filthy. And the other one says, nothing makes water filthy but what overcomes its smell, taste, or color. So there's no contradiction here. It might be clear for you before I even go further, but I want you to see how someone might think there is. So how would he think there's a contradiction here? He's going to say, wait, how could it not become filthy and then say something could make it filthy? How could it not be filthy but then could be filthy? Because he really doesn't process all of the information here. Something from the statement stood out to him, from the 2 statements, and what stood out to him is each one is contrary to the other. But if a person sees these 2 statements and thinks there's a contradiction here, it's because he didn't really process all of what these statements contain. The first one is specific to 2 kullats or more, but inclusive of what has changed and what has not changed. And the second one is specific to what has changed, but inclusive of 2 kullats or more or less, but inclusive of 2 kullats or less. If water reached 2 kullats, so not less, so there's something specific here. Something specific here. If water reached 2 kullats, then surely it does not become filthy. So it won't become filthy under this specific condition here. Not absolutely. Then nothing makes water filthy but what overcomes its smell, taste, or color. When we put these 2 together, we know that this one is for something that's less than 2 kullats. So there's no contradiction here. Thus, the inclusiveness of the first is restricted by the specificity of the second. And hence the judgment is that whatever is less than 2 kullats becomes filthy even if it did not change. If you have a question there, feel free, please. If it is not possible to reconcile 2 authentic statements, then neither is applied. Neither is applied until what tips the scales for one of them becomes clear. Yani, you have 2 statements, 2 authentic statements. Both of them seem to be contradicting each other. Like if we went back to the ones we started with, these hadith here, these 2. The best of witnesses in one hadith is the one who comes with his testimony before he's subpoenaed. And then according to the other hadith, the one who comes with testimony without being subpoenaed is dispraised. So if you don't know the context, then it looks like there's a contradiction. So what do? Do you say, this is all invalid? No, it's not necessarily invalid. It's just that you don't see how they go together. So that's why you would say to the person, for example, make this make sense for me. Can you make this make sense for me? You said on one hand, such and such. And on the other hand, you said such and such. I can't see how those go together. Can you tell me? Can you put those together for me? So maybe he can. So maybe he'll say, yeah, the first one, that's when I went to the store. But the other one, that's when I was still home. So there's no contradiction, for example. But if you don't know, then you will halt. Say, well, I can't determine what's going on here. As far as I know, Yani, I have this statement, I have this statement, and I have nothing to. I can't work with these 2. These statements are canceling each other out for me. This statement cancels this one, and this statement cancels this one. So what I'm going to do? So then you stop. until something that tips the scales for you becomes clear. And Allah knows best. Any question? Is sarcasm halal for us? I don't know if there's some details. It's not always haram. I don't know if it's sometimes haram. I don't have any details. But what's important for you to take away from this is that if someone's being sarcastic, understand the sarcasm and then deal with it appropriately. Like, don't go off somewhere else. You're a liar and this and this, and missing the point. So when can we be general without including an exception statement? Don't be general if the generality is by itself haram or blasphemy. If the generality is by itself haram or blasphemy, then don't be general. But this thing about being general is there's something that's normal about it. There might be something you're good at. And let's say you need to explain to a person this that you are good at. You need to make them understand, and you already understand. You understand the detail and the complexity, or whatever details or complexity is involved in whatever you're trying to explain to this person. And you know that you can't just say all of it to him all at one time. So what you're going to do, sometimes you're going to generalize. So you're going to say an open statement for him because you need to. And then he's going to take the open statement from you. And then when you need to, you're going to say, but this open statement, though, it's not absolute. Sometimes there's exceptions here. Or when the generality is wrong, when the generality leads to misunderstanding, then don't be general. Like, don't say, wudu is broken by anything that comes out of the private parts. And then you stop there. Because then you're going to lead him to think that if he ejaculates, it broke his wudu. Eid Kareem. He said, what is 15 lunar years equivalent to Gregorian solar years? 14 and a half, approximately. You're going to be older in the lunar calendar than by Gregorian calendar. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك